Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Nathan Sorensen. I am the Strategic Information Technology Procurement Officer for the Midwestern Higher Education Compact. Thank you for joining us today for MHEC's webinar with Xerox on how universities have leveraged managed print services for success and savings. A few housekeeping items before we begin. This call is being recorded so that we may make it available online. In addition, we will email you the slides. To ensure everyone can hear, we will mute the lines. We also encourage you to ask lots of questions by using the chat feature located on the left-hand portion of your screen. In the event we cannot answer all of the questions in the time allotted, we will respond after this event. Finally, at the conclusion of this webinar, you will receive a brief survey. Please be sure to give us your feedback so that we can continue to improve our webinar series. Before turning the controls over to our guest presenters from Xerox, I'd like to briefly introduce the Midwestern Higher Education Compact to you and how we arrived at this contract with Xerox and the resources available to you regarding the contract. To help you understand our contracting authority and why MHEC is involved with these technology contracts, it is best to have a better understanding about our organization. We are an interstate compact charged with advancing Midwestern higher education through interstate cooperation and resource sharing. The Midwestern Higher Education Compact is one of 4 regional compacts in the United States, with each having their own niche for addressing issues and advocating for higher education. Often referred to as MHEC, our niche was rooted in cost savings programs created by and supported by stakeholders from the 12 Midwestern states. The compact is governed by a 60-member board called the Commission, made up of governors, designees, legislative, and higher education leaders, essentially trying to help students get into and matriculate through college, as well as a source in policy, where we attempt to help decision makers, governors, legislators, and higher education leaders in our member states make more informed decisions and provide them with information. MHEC has agreements in place to extend our technology's cost savings program to the Southern Regional Education Board and to the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education. Currently, we do not have an agreement with the New England Board of Higher Education, and as the map shows, there are 3 states not covered by any of the compacts: New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. Now, you may be asking yourself, what is a compact? It is really a contract amongst the states. This legislation that was passed in each state makes us an instrumentality of state government in the 12 member states. Similarly, the other compacts have been statutorily created. What makes the compact unique to the higher education community is its broad contracting authority created in each of its member states. The compact is not a group purchasing organization. The compact is a means for stakeholders in the 12 member states to collaborate on identifying regional issues and committing resources to leverage a solution through the compact's statutory authority. We are very selective in the types of contracts that we pursue. We try to identify those areas that we can bring value in, and as a result, will be something that an individual institution may not be able to replicate on its own. But because we are working together across state lines, regionally, and now nationally, we can bring value that wouldn't have otherwise been there. MHEC's Technologies Committee identified the need for printer and multifunction printer solutions in the spring of 2008. The committee conducted a competitively sourced RFP and selected Xerox as the solution provider. The Master Price Agreement offers purchasing options, leasing options, and in July of 2009, Addendum number 1 was added for services and solutions. While all the contracts are negotiated on behalf of higher education, when the opportunity presents itself, the Compact negotiates to extend the contracts to K-12, cities, state, and local governments, which may include different price schedules. As this slide demonstrates, these are the member states and the eligible organizations that can leverage the Xerox contracts with MEC. Here's just a few of the institutions currently leveraging the MEC contract for managed print services. Now I'd like to share some resources that you can access to learn more about our contracts. Our MHECtech website features a couple of easy ways you may access our contracts. When accessing the site mhechtech.org, you may find a contract by selecting the toolbar at the top and selecting a category such as computer, hardware, software, or printers. Or you may go directly to the contracts section by clicking the contracts button in the upper right-hand corner. It's also important to note that we publish recent news about contracts, RFPs, as well as upcoming regional and national events. I also encourage you to visit the section on getting the most value from MEC contracts to receive some valuable tips on purchasing products and services using this contract vehicle. When selecting one of the categories, such as Xerox in this case, it takes you to a specific Xerox page which highlights the contract. You will also note some of the highlights include the contract terms, as well as at the right we have contract eligibility to make it easy for you to determine whether or not you're eligible. When you click on the first item for higher ed, it takes me to a Xerox microsite. Visitors will arrive at the Xerox website specifically tailored for MEC and its sister compact, SREB and WICHE. The Xerox website has additional information for purchasing Xerox products, including key contacts, contract overview, product information, and more. And as well as with our small printers contract with Xerox, we have a dedicated website to provide you more information and directly connect with Xerox. Clicking on the contracts link in the upper right-hand corner, you will find the ability to download contracts and their amendments and or addendums. Plus, the specific links to the state statutes for the MEC region are visible on the right-hand side of this page. And this slide demonstrates our current contracts and addendums and amendments with Xerox. So now that you know a little bit more about MEC, I want to introduce today's special presenters, Jack Boyle and Ed Driscoll. Jack is a fellow for Cleveland State University in Ohio, and Ed is a vice president for Xerox Higher Education Business Development. Thank you, gentlemen. And now I would like to turn the control over to you, Ed.
Thank you, Nathan, and thank you to the MEC team. We've enjoyed the partnership, as you said, through 2008, and we're really excited today to share with colleagues there in the higher education, from the community colleges to the private, public, state institutions, some of the exciting things we're doing in higher education. So today I'm going to cover Xerox transformation and our focus on higher education. And I know for those on the phone in higher education, you're going through a great deal of transformation. We're going to talk about some of the business challenges that we're seeing in higher education and how we're helping you address some of those challenges. Share some of the trends we're seeing. What's the opportunity? Nathan talked about managed print services. And so what is the opportunity really implementing an effective, what we call managed print and centralized print service opportunity? Help you get an operational definition, really what is managed print service. With great deal of variability, as we call on your colleagues and many of you. And so I think it's important. I think Forrester really has probably the best example of that. So we'll talk about that. I'll share Xerox approach and our value in this space. What are the industry consultants saying? And then I'll hand it over to Jack to kind of share Cleveland State's approach and what they implemented and what they did. So let me start out. You probably think of Xerox, you think we invented the copier and the printer. But we're so much more today. We are today over $21 billion in revenue with over 140,000 employees worldwide. Xerox made a very strategic acquisition in 2010 of Affiliated Computer Services, which really expanded our service offering for higher education. Today I'm going to focus really specifically, as Nathan brought up, the managed print services, but we extend to really a complete student lifecycle set of services for higher education. Today we have multiple different industries that we support and align. My focus is leading the higher ed practice nationally for Xerox, and you'll see we have other vertical industries as well. So today's focus is all about you and higher education. So what are we seeing? We created this team about 3.5 years ago, and what we've seen in particular as of late are these pretty consistent challenges out there in the marketplace. Responding to fiscal constraints, alumni and donor contributions, you're looking to increase those. You're being challenged with research funding, heavy focus on retention and graduation rates and improving student outcomes. The impact on green and sustainability. Many of you today have sustainability officers. Mobility and the impact BYOD is bringing to your campuses. And security. We can't seem to pick up the paper and not read something about an attack, whether that's Target, Home Depot, and others, right? So everybody's vulnerable. And then a big focus on enrollment and recruitment. So these are some of the critical challenges that we're seeing in higher education. Today's focus in managed print and centralized print services really can impact 3 key areas: fiscal constraints and how we can help you drive hard cost savings, the impact that can have on sustainability. Jack will talk about that in detail, and then help you really implement a better student experience, as well as faculty and staff around addressing the challenges of technology and the impact technology is bringing to your campuses. And how do you take advantage of that? And so we'll talk about that as well. So some things you may not be aware of. 100% of students, they say, by 2017 will be bringing at least one mobile device to your campus. Last year, the average number of mobile devices brought on campus was 3.5 devices. So that's putting tremendous strain / opportunity for colleges today. 11% of the applicant pool, they say, will shrink by 2015. So again, more pressure on top-line revenue growth. On average, alumni givings are only 10%. I talked about state appropriations. They're down significantly. Since 2007 to 2012, 25%, even though this last year, many states, they're flat or a slight increase. What's happened? You know, healthcare has gone up, your electricity costs are going up, more students are coming on campus, you got to build those infrastructures, so being more efficient. And we're seeing tremendous focus from higher education, looking at every critical business process and function. Almost 700 presidents have signed the President's Climate Council commitment. Very specific requirements around energy savings, greenhouse gas. And so these are all different challenges and opportunities within higher education. So now I want to get you involved. So I know the lines are muted. However, I'd like to get some input from all of you out there, and like to see if you could give me a simple yes, no, or you have no idea on your document lifecycle strategy. Do you know how many documents are produced each day on your campus? So Mary, we'll give it 30 seconds and let the audience give their response. This is typically what we see when very few really know what that spend is. Like, I love at least 3 of us. Are you kidding? Okay, Mary, what do the results look like? Okay, this is not a surprise, right? And no one really knows what that current spend is today, so you got to be thinking about that, right? How do you know what you're going to do is good for your business, your institution, if you don't have a baseline? Okay, we have one more question. When you look at a document lifecycle strategy, what are the true costs associated with documents? Do you believe it's 2% of your operating budget, 5%, 12%, 20%? I really don't know. So why don't we take a minute here and have the audience provide their insight. Well, we got a little bit of everything, no surprise. Okay, Mary, let's see what we have. Over 50% don't know. We got a couple all in the middle there, and the actual answer is 2%. So we had 23% of you, so congratulations, and we'll get into that here in a second. So Gartner, leading industry consultant, would say 1 to 3% of your total operating spend is tied up in document-related expense. IDC would say 5 to 15%. What we've seen at Xerox, doing well over 300 assessments, is really right around that 2% area. So if you look at a typical institution that maybe has a $200 million operating budget, that would mean $4 million is tied up in print-related expense. So let me kind of break that up for you a little bit so you understand where this all comes from. So Nathan talked about managed print services, a lot of focus on the office. On average, that's about 40% of the total pie. When you look at your in-plant print mail centers, so that's people, facility, people doing design work. You have some of that in many institutions. Some of that's done at different departments within the university. Could be the dean of business have their own. Liberal arts may have their own. But on average, that's 26%. And then you have 34% that is central or outsourced. And with some institutions, they bring a lot inside. Many institutions have already closed shops and send it all out. So there could be some variability on the percentages on your institution. But on average, this is what we see. So when you look at an institution at a $200 million operating budget, that means you have an opportunity of hard cost savings anywhere between $800 to $1.2 million when you look at a 20 to 30% savings opportunity. For those institutions, to give you some examples here, a $600 million institution, I know we have different schools of various sizes on the line. The same math works. The total spend is about $12 million, and that opportunity is anywhere between $2.4 million to $3.6 million. If you're a billion-dollar institution, you can see the savings is even greater. So the point that earlier nobody really knew what they're currently spending today, and then you start looking at what that opportunity is, this is where you have to decide as your institution, is this a big enough idea? Is this something that makes sense? And many institutions not only realizing savings, but they're reinvesting those savings back into the academic side or other areas of the institution. So it really gets to be self-funding. So now that you have an idea of what the opportunity is, let's really define what is managed print service. And Forrester is another leading industry consultant in this space. And I really feel, and I'm a visual learner, that they really do a good job of laying out, really the trend within managed print service. So as Nathan stated, this contract that we've enjoyed with them in 2008 was really built on just equipment and services, technology and services. And then you have what's limited managed print. So maybe you have an on-site technician, or you have someone managing, putting supplies in. Okay, maybe you have some tools on your network. but you're still managing technology, you're leasing it, you're buying it. You really haven't optimized. You really haven't developed a strategy. There's no governance. When you start getting to the far right, when we talk full outsource managed print services, now you really change the enterprise. And you start to bring in governance and change management. You start bringing proactive management of your devices, move, add, change, real-time reporting. You start to assess. The first step is you assess and design what you have, because as all of you said, you don't know. So you have to start there. That's the first logical step. So when you get to that far right, that is where you start to realize the kind of savings numbers that I spoke about earlier. And so you may find you're not ready to go to the far right. So you may want to work with a partner who can help you in that middle area. I think what's really important is you have to decide where do you want to go, and then work with a partner who's going to help you get there at the speed you want to get there. What we've seen, I've personally seen in the last, almost 3.5 years doing this, I would say about 85% of even RFPs that I see have at least limited NPS. Many are going to the far right. So I've seen a huge change in the marketplace. So hopefully that helps a little bit around what it is. So let me share with you our approach, methodology, and value prop in higher education. And we really have a three-pronged approach. And it really starts with, as I said earlier, understanding what is my baseline. This is not about I get a cheaper printer or copier. This is about understanding your total cost of ownership, and then working and developing a program that's going to drive that total cost of ownership down 20 to 30+%. And then as you do that, then you start to build the infrastructure. You start to see the impact you can have significantly in greenhouse gas, energy savings, but you also then have to build a very secure, mobile, integrated environment. So working collaboratively with IT and procurement to understand those requirements, security requirements. And then as you implement that infrastructure, you're always challenged continuing to drive more savings. So how do you automate and simplify and actually create less print? So it starts with printing for less, right? Print for less. And then how do we help you print less? And really take your unstructured documents and integrate them to your ERP system, your Oracle, your Workday, your PeopleSoft solution. It could be your content management solution. So that is our recommendation and our approach, working with your institutions and your peers. And it's all, we go as fast or as slow as you're ready to go. And normally institutions, as you know, higher ed, there's no such thing as a mandate. And so how do you get buy-in? How do you get finance, IT, faculty, and staff? So it's critical that you really bring them together, especially if you want to go to the far right of managed print services as defined by Forrester and others. Similar, when you look at centralized print services, very similar. We see the same thing. People don't understand their total spend, how much is being done outside versus inside, and when you bring in mail, another component. So it's very similar as far as assessing and optimizing that environment, establishing a baseline. The difference there is you secure and integrate, you start to build workflow, you start to allow people to send jobs anywhere, anytime, from home, anywhere in the campus that they need. But the big trend we're seeing is how do you leverage social media? How do you really start to drive more effective communication? So examples we're bringing to higher ed, instead of printing the view book or your alumni magazine, wouldn't it be more compelling to send that content to the way the student, faculty, staff, or community wants to be served? It could be printed. It could be pushed through an iPad, a Droid, okay? And now you can start to make it dynamic. You can start to do video. You can start to do common apps online. You can set up site visits. So if you think of a view book, for example, for alumni magazine, you can start to cross-sell. You can sell the advertising time just like you do on normal documents. But what you really get to do now is think of the analytics behind both. And that's a big change that we're seeing in higher ed, trying to take advantage, like other industries, around data analytics. So now you start to see what your alumni are interested in. So now you can communicate more effectively and follow up with them the way they want to be communicated to. When you're targeting the right student, now you start to see where their interests are. So maybe it's nursing, liberal arts, engineering. You start to communicate to them the way they want to be communicated to. So this is the power and exciting times that I think higher ed could take advantage of by really partnering with people who really understand your endpoint vision. So great opportunity to take advantage of the technology instead of having technology overwhelm institutions. Just some of the universities that are partnering with Xerox in different facets, whether it's managed print services, centralized print services, or both. So we're proud of what we accomplished in the last 3 years. Coming out of the end of this year, we would have partnered with 38 new institutions that weren't doing business with Xerox that are somewhere along that continuum, and most of them on the far right, where they're really going after optimizing that environment to really drive the kind of savings they want, but also drive a better experience for the students, faculty, staff, and impact top-line revenue. What some of the industry consultants have said, Gartner has positioned Xerox the leader in the Magic Quadrant for the last 6 years, and this year we actually extended our distance compared to our closest competitors for 2 key reasons: our ability to execute and our vision. Our vision around that secure and integrate and automate and simplify process, for example. And you could see IDC, Xerox has a consistent global delivery model, that we continue to build out our infrastructure. And then Forrester talks about our focus on not only industries, but expanding our services beyond managed print, which many institutions are asking for. So hopefully that provided some insight in regards to Xerox and our focus on higher education and some of the solutions and our approach to managed print services in particular. And now I'd like to introduce Jack Boyle. Jack is the senior fellow at the Levine College of Urban Affairs at Cleveland State. I worked with Jack back in 2010. Jack was the VP of Finance, CFO of Cleveland State, and really the champion of bringing managed print services to Cleveland State. So Jack, welcome.
Thank you, Ed. I just thought I would start by giving you a little background on Cleveland State University so you can sort of put our project into context. We're a mid-sized urban university located in downtown Cleveland. We have about an 85-acre campus with 40-some buildings, 4 million square feet. We have about 17,500 students in 8 now, soon to be 9 colleges. You can see our full-time faculty and staff. So we have over 20,000 people on campus on any average day. And we do a substantial amount of research, not a huge university in terms of research, but we do a substantial amount. First of all, our managed print service project was part of an overall $50 million energy conservation project that Cleveland State entered into back in the about 8 years ago. We began it. And so the executive buy-in really began at that point. Xerox was part of an overall bid that we did, and they came in as part of the overall energy conservation project. We had set managed print service project goals early on in the project. We wanted to develop, design, and implement an enterprise-wide document output strategy that both satisfied our mission as well as our commitment to environmental stewardship. We wanted to improve the quality and delivery of our output. We wanted to reduce energy consumption, greenhouse gas, and solid waste. And most importantly, we wanted a guarantee of at least $500,000 worth of savings annually, or $5 million over the 10-year life of the current contract that we were to enter into. We did end up, after the first full year, with an actual savings of $687,000. And we did want to leverage the MHEC contract in order to quickly meet our goals. And the reason for this was that managed print service is not really a service that you can logically develop an RFP or even RFQ to deliver. The best, and we thought the only way to deliver it was through this kind of a contract. The MEC contract is incorporated into the master contract that we signed with Xerox. There is a separate section, Article 4 of the contract, which deals specifically with Xerox and managed print service, and that's the piece of it that we entered into. And then there was about a 150-some page statement of work attached to that, which had all the deliverables in it in terms of the number of machines, where they'd be located, and the pricing and so forth. The case for financial case for updating our upprint services were several. First of all, there were student expectations. The students, of course, want green, they want state of art, they want mobility. We wanted to overcome tech disruptions. The fact that the printers are now all networked mean that it's very easy to divert a job to another printer if one does briefly go down. We had, of course, economic pressures that we discussed, cost savings, and the elimination of the need for capital dollars for this equipment was very important to Cleveland State. We wanted flexibility. We wanted a system where every user had access to print, fax, scan, and copy, which they didn't in the existing state. We wanted it to cover multiple locations. We wanted to develop a more paperless workflow system, and I would emphasize that that's one of the most important pieces, and Ed touched on it a little bit, but we really were in the business of eliminating paper as much as we were coming up with a more efficient way of delivering the services. And so part of the project that we had was to get HR involved in terms of training people to a new way of doing business. The existing status at Cleveland State, which was typical of what your survey that you just took demonstrated, and we were no different. In fact, we probably even knew less. There was no centralized information at Cleveland State on what equipment was out there or any idea of the number of pages we printed or the number of dollars that were actually expended university-wide on this function. And the IT involvement was minimal. They did the programming, but they did not do any centralized purchasing of equipment. There was university-wide a process for buying equipment, but there was no real system for buying equipment. So while we had a state system for bidding the equipment either for purchase or for lease, there was really no system at all which brought this into any kind of a centralized focus. There was generally no department budget for capital equipment. The purchases were generally made with end-of-the-year savings, so that the annual budgets in the departments usually only included supplies and maintenance. And so when there was a problem with a piece of equipment, the departments, during the course of the year, the departments were always faced with an issue of what was going to give in order to replace the Xerox machine.
Jack, we have one question that came in regarding students, and the question, Jack, is what role did the students play in the adoption of managed print services?
Well, we had a very active student group that was pressing us for any kind of energy conservation that we could come up with, and so they were very active in arguing for any kind of a system that was going to reduce the number of pieces of paper flying around campus, but at the same time make it more convenient for them because they have their own printer output process on campus where they can print things at the labs, and so they were looking for a more efficient way to do that also. The actions we we conducted, first of all, a current state assessment, which, as I said, Xerox did as part of the overall $50 million energy contract. And I would only emphasize, if you're getting involved into a managed print service, there's no way that you want anybody but the vendor that you're going to end up with to do the current state assessment, because what you learn in the process really helps you to decide then what the future state's going to look like. We did a physical inventory of all office devices campus-wide. We got approval by departments of the current state, so we mapped out every building floor by floor, what exactly equipment was at each location and where it was. We discovered a total of 2,597 devices, which was approximately a 1-to-1 device-to-person ratio. We developed an initial draft of a future state by redoing the maps floor by floor to show what a new system configuration would look like. We figured out that the device utilization was actually 0.59%, which means that these machines were being used less than 1% of the time. And you can see there the average per student paper output and the average monthly paper volume for a knowledge worker. This is an example, and I don't expect you to read this because, in fact, I can't read it, so I'm sure you can't either. But the important thing here was this was the second floor of the University Administration Center, which was the floor in which my office was located, and we made an executive decision that we were going to try and sell this to the campus, that we had to be the first to implement the new system. So we did the mapping on our floor first. We discovered that we had 52 machines, and we had 45 workers, and these were where they were distributed around the second floor of the administration building. We then, as the next piece, we developed an optimal state design guidelines. We determined, first of all, that all devices must be networked or at least be able to be networked, that personal printers were recommended for removal and restricted, so the printer that was sitting on the desk or the credenza of the average employee, we were asking to be removed. This became an enormous issue with the faculty. Eventually we had to make some concession to allow the desktop printers to eventually go out by simply not servicing them or permitting any additional purchase of them. But it did become an issue that we had to resolve at several faculty senate meetings. Standalone fax devices will be recommended for removal and mitigated to MFD devices, multifunctional devices where possible. We wanted to utilize existing devices, which were what were already in the departments, only if they were 2 years old or less, and if they were able to be networked. So they had to be multifunctional devices, they had to be less than 2 years old, and they had to be able to be networked. Shared color is considered a color requirement. Personal color is not. What that means was that everybody was going to have access to a color printer, but the color printer might not be the one that was closest to your office. It might be the next closest one. So that there was a little extra amount of footsteps involved in getting a color print job done, which we determined in the long run ended up with a lot less color being used because people didn't automatically go to it because that's what their particular printer defaulted to. We also, as an aside, when we put the program together for the future state, we determined that the default was going to be multi-sided printing, so that you had to not only go to the system settings to change it if you wanted to go to color, you also had to go to the system settings and change it if you wanted single-side printing. The existing lease devices, if compliant, were left in place until the date of the contract expiration, but then they would not be reused and would be replaced after that. And maintaining existing functions, meaning you would have access somehow to color as well as fax scan, and copy was necessary in all areas. Now this is a chart of what the current state when we started and what the future state, what we determined it would be afterwards. As I said, we had 2,597 devices when we started. The future state ended up with 350. The ratio of users to machines went up to 10.2 to 1 instead of 1.2 to 1. The utilization rate more than tripled. You can see the cost per item went down dramatically, and that includes everything except paper. So in the future state, pricing was all supplies with a capital with a 5-year refresh of all the machines. Repairs and the helpline were all included in that one inclusive price. One price for color, one for black and white. And this is what the second floor of the administration building looked like after we adopted the program. There were 7 devices for the 45 workers. And in fact, there could have been as few as 4, but there was one very small department on our floor which was very sensitive because it was a affirmative action office which had to maintain its machines, even though normally a 3-person department probably would not qualify for the kind of output device that they ended up with. This is an example of our solid waste reductions. The only point I'd like to make here is that the energy savings were only about 25,000 of the $500,000. Not to say that it wasn't important to have the energy savings. It was vitally important, but the program needs to be sold more for the overall cost savings than it is just for the solid waste savings. That was one of the first issues that the science faculty figured out was, oh, you're trying to sell this as an energy program, and it is, but that's not its primary purpose. There are a lot of benefits here at the faculty, staff, and students. We want to allow enough time for questions, so I'm not going to go through all of these. You are going to get a copy of this presentation later, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. It was important that you understand that this is an outsourced service. It's not just a master lease of equipment. It's not that at all. It's actually you are outsourcing your print, fax, scan, and copy function to a vendor. And so that's the most important piece that you have to bear in mind. There is no longer a need to have any capital budget for any of the devices because is all built into the one price. So these are, I think, some of the reasons and are really good reasons why we got into it, and I certainly would recommend that each one of you seriously consider getting into a managed print service program. And I would guess because of the difficulty of selling it and getting involved in it, that it's really, I would urge you to do it all or nothing, just because the complexity of getting into it really, in my view at least, didn't warrant doing it halfway, but it certainly did warrant doing it the whole way.
Thanks, Jack. If anyone has questions, please use the chat feature on the left-hand side of your screen. I do have one question, Jack. And the question is, what are some key recommendations you can share to ensure a successful implementation?
Well, I think the most important piece is to get higher up, real high up, like presidential involvement really early. The second thing I would say is to get particularly the academic side of the institution involved from day one. I think the biggest thing I would do differently if I were to do it all over again, I would not just start by doing my floor, but I would also start by doing one academic department so that after the initial test phase, we had both an academic and an administrative floor as part of the test. So I think those two things were key. Buy-in from the top and make sure that your academic side is fully bought in also.
Well, thanks for answering the questions, Jack. We don't have any other questions in the queue, but looks like we have one more question, Jack. And as you implemented the program, how did you get your staff to adopt the program?
A lot of communication and a lot of training. We had several training sessions on the program once it was adopted. HR took a very meaningful and upfront role in this, both in training on how to use the equipment, but also how to go as paperless as possible. So we did like the training for both the new way of doing business, both from an equipment standpoint, but also from a paper flow standpoint. And we did both of those together. And now we're into the second year of the program, finished for the second year actually in June 30th. And I think now there's virtually no questions about why did you do this. People just take it as a way of doing business and take it for granted that they have to walk 10 more feet to get their output, but it's a good thing for the university.
Great. Jack, we got one more question that just came in. From start to finish, how long did the entire process take? From starting research to actually operational?
I think we were about a year into making the decision to go ahead, doing the initial study of the current state and coming up with a future state program, and then we began the input about a year down the line. That took us to about mid-year, which is January in our case, and so we had substantial number of the departments implemented in the next 6 months, although not quite all of them. So it was a year and a half to 2 years from the beginning of the decision to do the study to the implementation throughout the university.
Great, thank you. And I have one question for Ed, and the question is, how would someone get started?
I think Jack kind of touched on it. I think it starts with an assessment. You know, when you're going to do something of this magnitude, you have to understand a baseline. The CFO is going to demand that. They're going to want to charge back, and so they're going to, want to do something to the budget. And so I think it really starts with an assessment, not just an assessment of the assets, but a critical part is getting the voice of the customer. So that means getting not only the students, faculty, and staff, and understanding their process, what they're doing, what they would like. And so as you really understand the hard cost numbers behind it, also get the things that are important to your college and university, and then once you understand that baseline, then you can make a good go, no-go decision.
Great. Thanks, Ed, for answering that question. And Jack, thanks for presenting your perspective on how Managed Print Services was implemented. I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. Do not hesitate to reach out to us. Our contact information is included. And you will also see we have contact information for our legal counsel should you have any questions directly for Rob. Please remember to take our survey at the conclusion of this webinar. Again, we will post the webcast on our YouTube page and to our MEC news and events. You will also be able to find upcoming announcements about webinars. Finally, we appreciate our special guests, Jack and Ed, for joining us today. Goodbye.